Hello everybody and welcome to the Isolation Conversation with me, Mark Stokes, a series of videos designed to discuss all things digital whilst working remotely in isolation. This is the Isolation Conversation episode 4, all about technical communities. I'm joined by three very special guests today: Jugo, who organises European Collaboration Summit, Mark Jones, who organises the Club 365 online conferences, and Matt Weston, who organises Power Platform Users Group here in the UK. I'm very interested to hear the insights they have of either running long-term virtual conferences and what they've learned from that, and also moving from in-person events to online events, and what it means to be a large conference organiser that's had to postpone in this current situation. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Hi everyone, here we are at the Isolation Conversation, episode 4. I'm going to go around and let everyone introduce themselves, say who they are, what they do, what their involvement is with the community, and maybe a little something that you've learned over the last week, maybe related to the current situation, maybe something completely different, but just something interesting for people to learn. And then we'll go on and just talk about how we enable communities and what's changed with the current situation. So first of all, we can start with my top left. We'll go with Mark Jones.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mark. So my name's Mark Jones, as Mark said. I've actually been in the community probably for about 10 years now. I started with a site with a guy called Vlad Katranescu that some of you may have heard of. And we created a site called SharePoint Community, and then that morphed into all things Club 365. So the current state of the players, we've been running virtual conferences for over 6 years, with the first one being SP24, which was a round the world 24-hour conference. I've also got a very active blog where we get people who guest contribute, and we also put content into ourselves. And then on top of that, that's not enough. I also run the Club 365 microjob service, which is a dedicated freelancer service for Microsoft people. One interesting fact, so I've been thinking about that because you told me there was a prompt before, Mark, and I was thinking I've not really got anything that's kind of Microsoft related, but I'm actually running an event called GlobalCon 2. And this is the first one ever when I just started running Facebook Google AdWords. And strangely enough, I've obviously never done them before, and I targeted a keyword called Microsoft Teams Conference. And I didn't actually think at all whether that would be people searching for a conference, how you come to GlobalCon 2, or what I found out later, actually everybody's trying to find out how to do a Microsoft Teams conference, which was a big dirt moment. So I spent a good amount of cash on that, and that's my learning. Always test your phrases before you actually go and put some ad spend behind them.
That is a good tip. Awesome. Matt, do you want to go next? You're on my top right.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Matt Weston. I'm a Microsoft MVP from the Midlands in the UK. I'm the managing director of a small consultancy called Vantage 365. I tend to do a lot of community work around user groups. So I run the West Midlands Office 365 and SharePoint user group. And I also run the Black Country Power Apps and Power Automate user group. So obviously the whole situation that we're in at the moment has really affected those. So yeah, looking forward to talking about those. One of the things that I've learned over the last week, actually today, I almost had one of my little wet myself exciting moments where I found something new that I'd not seen in SharePoint before. And that's where the conditional formatting not only applies to a column, it now applies to an entire row of view. So that was my little pant wetting moment today that I got really excited about. So there you go. It's now rolled out, especially if you're in the UK tenancies.
Nice. Addis?
Hi, so I'm probably I'm the only one here not from UK. I'm Addis Jugo, living in Bingen in Germany, running a small consultancy here called Nubelus, and I'm serving on a board of directors of Syskit, the makers of SP Docket and other SharePoint governance tools. Community-wise, I'm doing European Collaboration Summit, which started 8 years ago as a small community gig of 3 friends in Zagreb, Croatia. Moved to Germany. Now we would have, if this all would happen, 2,500 people on a physical conference, which is, of course, now everything is changed. The rules are changed, the setup is changed, everything is changed right now. So we will be talking in the next questions how we are dealing with that and what we are doing with that one. What I learned this week are actually two things which are really important. One is, small rotary controls that you can plug to Raspberry Pis and think in the user remote controls. I actually learned how to control those with Python. Right, Mark, that's the one. I actually learned how to use those from Python because I need something just to get off of the whole Microsoft 365 thing and to do something which is completely different. And the second one, I managed to finish the practicing piece on the guitar, which I was practicing for 2 months and actually not getting it right. Today, I decided I got it right. I'm moving to the next one. that would be basically what I did.
Nice. We can give us a little rendition at the end and we'll put that in the outtakes.
Okay.
Yeah, do you know what? Interesting for me as well. I've had this Raspberry Pi for years and it's been sitting in a box literally for about 4 years. I've never had time to do anything with it. But one thing I've learned as well is actually making some time for pet projects. And that's something I've been picking up a lot more as well. In fact, I saw some of your posts on Facebook. I think you've tied it into an amp, aren't you? You're kind of building an amp.
Yeah, I had a very old... I actually salvaged a very old Grundig amp from 60s. It was a Cube amp, but it just died on me. I spent some time and too much money trying to get it working. At some point, I just said, it doesn't make sense to get it working. But I have this old beautiful Grundig box, like, those from 60s, like all in one, like with turntable and everything all in one. So I'm just replaying the amp and the old amp I'm replacing with Raspberry Pi and dedicated solid-state Tempo Raspberry as a streamer device, basically, inside.
Nice. Love it. Cool. Right. So first thing then. So let's go through it. So obviously we're talking about isolation here. We're talking about the current lockdown that's going on. So just give us some background on maybe Matt, starting with you on what's changed for your events then for the user groups. Just tell us about what's been going on and how that's been.
So obviously the big thing around user groups. Yes, it's good that we have the technical presentations. However, a lot of it is a lot of the user group element is based around the social aspect, the drink afterwards, or just the refreshments, where you can get to know people. Because generally, you meet people that you've never met before, you wouldn't normally go and speak to. Especially if you went to a larger conference, you tend to stick with groups of people that you know. Whereas at user groups, you tend just to speak to everybody because it's a much smaller audience. So that whole piece has really changed for us. Obviously, we've moved everything online, and people's perceptions and the way that they interact with each other very much differs when they try and run or interact in a user group online. Because as everybody now is just silent while I'm talking. Generally, if you're in a more face-to-face environment, you jump in with your own anecdotes, your ideas, and so it becomes much more of an interactive session. So, yeah, I mean, the whole move from being that user group where you can have that face-to-face, that interaction, to moving online has been a massive change for us.
Mm. No, I agree with that. I can echo that. And I ran for about 10 years for SharePoint user groups in Manchester. And we actually closed ours down last December because we found people stopped coming anyway to the in-person events. I mean, it's another topic we'll come on to later. So I was already seeing a downgrade, but then the Power Apps user groups were picking up and they were going strong, and lots of other technologies are gone. So I think it was a branding thing. But so we found that as well. And I just couldn't believe that people stopped coming to the user groups anyway. There's even before the lockdown. And so that was the exact reason. I just didn't understand why people were missing that opportunity to interact. So I totally get that. And I think that's one of the big things of online versus in person. Is why I think you need a balance of both, really. But I think that's a huge bit, and that's a good bit to put on to Mark about how do we kind of encourage that user interaction. Obviously, I'm always in the chat on your conferences, Matt, and it does flow quite quick. You don't get there's so many people getting involved. I guess when you're in a user group or in an in-person conference, most of your groups go down to 2, 3, 4 people max anyway in a conversation. Anything bigger than that isn't an intimate conversation. So How do you nurture that same level of networking?
Well, we've just had a discussion this week about exactly that, and we're looking to introduce a new kind of concept at the next conference, which is like virtual call them hangouts or breakout rooms, which is effectively where you can get people to come in, you'll get somebody who's going to host it, and it'll be very similar to this kind of meeting where you'll have 4 people talking about a prescribed topic or whatever, and that will hopefully bring some of that back. But to answer your question, it is really hard. It's really hard to keep people engaged because The problem you get with online, everybody's distracted. Right now, we'll be looking at this, and I bet we've all got our email clients out, and somebody's popping up over there. And if it's interesting, you're going to have a quick look, and it's really, really hard to keep people engaged. But one thing we are finding, and we've proven it on 2 now, one of the techniques you can do is if you give away some swag and you encourage the engagement, because you get a lot of lurkers in the chat, and Matt, you'll know this, having spoken for us loads. We can see, obviously, from the analytics point of view, that we're getting loads of people watching, but hardly anybody's chatting. But as soon as you say the best question, it gets a free bit of swag or a free pass or something, suddenly all the questions flow in, and then all the comments at the end of that, everybody goes, I really enjoyed that. So I think there is a little bit of it where everybody's a bit nervous, even though it's still online and it's still chat, they're still a little bit nervous to jump in and stop being a lurker and actually become engaged.
So I think reach out to the speakers a little bit as well and say, bring something into your session, and partway through the session, invite some questions, invite some feedback. I mean, I know yours are pre-recorded live sessions, so you can't ask the speaker something direct, but maybe certain points in the session, just change it a bit for online to encourage that.
Yeah, and one of the cool things actually is, now you're on the pre-recorded bit, is what that allows is the speakers to come into the chat, and as you can see, as you've been there and experienced it, I think that's where most of the value comes from, because the speaker can obviously, they don't have to worry about doing the session. They're just there to help answer questions. And I think that's a really valuable part of it.
I find that so useful as a speaker doing it, to be able to engage that conversation. Because I say in a face-to-face room, I always like audience participation in mind. I always drag them in, ask questions, and have a conversation as much as possible. And you're right, Matt, you can't do that on video because there's just a little bit too much latency to kind of have it natural. Like, I can't interrupt you like I would in a in-person session. That's definitely. So interesting then. So Addis, a little bit about give some background then on if you compare to on Collab Summit and sort of going from your perspective from a larger operation.
Right. So Collab Summit is there's a difference to the other larger conferences, Microsoft 365 conference worldwide. Collab Summit is specific that it's a community-initiated event. Team has been basically. Oh, I'm hearing myself again. Okay. I'm hearing.
Yeah, I can hear an echo.
Okay, this is getting deep.
I don't. If that makes any difference.
Okay. Now it's better. Not really. Okay. Anyway, I will try. So we'll see how it works. The difference with Collab Summit is that we are a community-based event. So we are run by few people at the moment. Basically, core team is Spence Harbor, me, and Elena, who was former Microsoft employee. Just trying to organize everything and running everything, and due to our community nature and the pricing that we have set up as community nature, basically our price is like €200, and for that money, basically you get the same or better, or even better program than the conferences. We would pay like 2,000 for that. So we were in February, very cheery and happy people. Because we basically had a sold-out conference with only over 1,800 attendees confirmed, registered, and then this. So everything changed. You never know what really happens with the conference. How long is the lockdown going to last? The first info was like mid of April. Okay, the conference was original dates were in June, so mid of April. Yeah, that will still work. Will be difficult, but it will work. Then obviously now it's not going to work. We managed to move it to the end of October. We tried to move it in a way not possibly to hurt anybody else, because all the other events are approximately in the same time frame. And even if we are not doing this for money as a community, we need on this scale to behave basically as a business. So what this means, we paid a lot of money to the venue and to the catering in advance. And for 2,000 people, it's a lot of money, just on scale. So it was a very difficult situation to us. We needed to move the conference and try to move it in a way that we don't get privately broke. In this case, Pennsylvania and me, which would be not thing I would prefer to happen to me at the moment. So it's venue was making issues. They were insisting on the dates in June, and when it was basically obvious that it will not be possible. It's not going to happen in June. They were still insisting us paying them 80% of the commitment price for June, which was like 150,000 euro, which we were like, no, we are not paying this. We don't have this money, and we are not paying you this money. So it did cost us a lot of nerves and and some sleepless nights until that part was basically solved in a way that we are satisfied. We are still totally amazed that people are sticking to us, the attendees are sticking to us, sponsors are sticking to us. I think we, altogether 20 people returned the tickets. 10 were like individual people who those days don't work for me because I don't know, holidays in that German province, so I can't come. And 10 were from a German touristic company, TUI. Maybe you guys have heard of them, basically German version of Thomas Cook. And just right now it's happening to them what happened to Thomas Cook 6 months ago. So they basically pulled all the tickets back. So we basically lost like 20 tickets, which is nothing in a grand scale. So this is something that we are very thankful for and very amazed because we just hope that until October we will actually finally have the situation settled down and deliver the show, which we actually have prepared. I mean, it's all there. We have everything. We are in the starting positions. Just give us a date where people could be traveling and coming in person. So this is basically the challenges that we had the last few weeks. I had chats on the side with both Marks. Here I was talking to Mark Jones yesterday or 2 days ago, something like that, and to you, Mark, last week. So you guys knew bits and pieces of what I'm telling you right now. But if we manage, if the situation calms down until October, it will be all fine. Yeah. If it doesn't, then we are coming to the next round of this of the whole this shenanigans and trying to somehow get this thing rolling.
I think what's interesting there is, from my perspective, and you and I have spoken a couple of times about it, is that people are accepting of it. I think normally a lot of people in their nature can be quite negative when things happen, and you don't necessarily understand that there's forces outside of our control that make things like this change. It happens, but I see very little negativity around it. I think people just totally accept more now that things do go wrong. But I certainly hope that people will be more lenient going forward when things just go wrong. I think we've all come to realise everyone has to change and adapt. That's something I think this situation has changed. Like I say, as a sponsor, we're not worried about it so much, and I fully accept that it may need to be delayed again based on whether the situation is right or not. Who knows? But do you know what? In normal times, I'll probably be a bit annoyed and frustrated about that. But actually, you think, do you know what? Sometimes things are just out of control and you just got to go with it. And hopefully people take that forward more.
It is what it is. I mean, just one more anecdote for how people are supportive. One of the keynote speakers that planned and announced was Donna Sarkar. And we are happy to have Donna, and she's great, and we love her. And of course, we were not really communicating anything really officially in advance until we knew for sure from our side it works. So Donna is thinking on her side, hey guys, am I still on for that keynote? Like, yes, Donna, as long as you want to do that, as long as you want to be in, you are definitely in for it. She's now the principal advocate for the Power Platform. She moved there from the Windows Insiders, basically. And it just shows us how the people are actually sticking to us. That might be our advantage as a community event, as opposed to the other big events, which are basically definitely commercially based and for profit.
Yeah, and I think so. I think your event is definitely one of those. It's kind of filling the void that was left by Steve Smith's conferences. It's one of those that, from a speaker perspective, is one that all the speakers want to come to get together for that community where people don't see each other much. So it's kind of filled that void in there. And I think that then goes to the people who attend it as well. So I totally see that. So I guess then, so Mark, from your perspective then, is again embracing that. How's it affected maybe some of your timelines and some of your conferences? Because obviously, as you said, there's going to be a lot of conferences now at the end of the year as everyone tries to fill that gap. Has it made any difference whatsoever to your schedules?
No. Yes and no. So we always planned. What we did last year is we did an event, if you noticed, virtually every month. And to be honest, it became too chaotic and too hard to market. And by the time one was nearly there, you had to think about the next. So we decided to consolidate and go 4 per year under the Global Com name. And so what we have done differently, as soon as I got because I do a lot of Facebook ads, as soon as I got the Facebook ads out, quite a few people were commenting saying, what, June? We need something now. We need something right now. And then I saw all the stuff in the Teams group, because we run a massive Facebook Teams group, it's really active and it's exploded in its growth. And they're actually saying, well, we need something now. So what we did is we actually put on a warm-up day, which was, I think it was last week, wasn't it, Matt? Yeah, last week, I think. Yeah. And we've also, in addition to that, we had a load of training videos done by Matt J. Bailey, who's well, you'll all know him, a very good MVP. And we commissioned them for him to sell as part of our All Access Pass. And what we've done is we've taken those and put them into a Teams tab, which people can then deploy into their teams and help get up the user adoption. So although our schedule hasn't really changed, we're finding that we're doing a lot more reactive stuff to act to what people are asking for. And we're probably going to do another Global Com warm-up day in May. But as regards our schedule, we're still going to go once per quarter. Obviously, the next one is there's a bit of a lock where there's 3 big events. Obviously, Addis is doing one as well, and then we've got Joel's event. They're all going to hit at about the same time. So it's a question of how relevant can you keep your own event and still get the registrations up, etc. But from my point of view, I probably market it different to what other people do, because I go Facebook ads with targeting. So I'm probably getting to certain people that maybe the others won't do, and vice versa. So we're not seeing registrations really drop off, and we're nearly at 10,000. Well, we are at 10,000 registered now. So hopefully we'll still get the attendance, and hopefully we'll do a good job for the speakers, which is probably the most important thing for us as a team, is to do a good job for the speakers and bring a good attendance.
I wonder what the perception is from people on how easy it is to move an event. So I think everybody would totally understand that moving an in-person event is going to be a logistical nightmare of making new arrangements and everything like that. But I don't know if people would maybe appreciate how difficult it would be to also move a virtual event. So, okay, you could just not play the videos at a certain point. Was that all there is to it? Well, no, actually, you mentioned there the amount of adverts and everything that goes into it. I guess the logistics move and all the speakers being available again, even though people aren't traveling. Yeah. I guess it's still a logistical nightmare, just different to move a virtual event.
Yeah, it's nowhere near as hard as physical. You could do it, and we've actually moved events before. But the problem you get is one of the biggest challenges you have at a virtual event is trying to get people onboarded into the event. It's really hard. You can make it as plain as day how to get in, but you guarantee come the day our support inbox is going to be flooded. How do I get in? So we made a decision a while ago to spend money on getting as soon as the agenda's live, we spend money on targeting people that have registered free to go and fill their calendar up so they know exactly how to get in. And that works really, really well. So yeah, if we change the event then and all those iCals have gone out to thousands of people, then it's going to cost us money to do it. So it's like a bit of chicken and egg. It depends where you are on the life cycle of your event on how hard it is to move.
Yeah. So Matt, how about from your perspective on the user groups then, sort of communicating with your user base and then going from sort of in-person to online, what challenges has that brought?
So in terms of the actual logistics, it's not been as bad because obviously we're so small scale. So generally we see between 10 and 30 people at a user group. So it's not a massive issue just to be able to communicate out to them to say that, well, actually, we're now doing it online or rather than going face to face. Obviously, we've got venue hires, which they've come with their own challenges, trying to resolve those. But for the most part, it's probably the usual faces that we see at all the user groups anyway. So we've got that rapport where we can and we communicate with each other anyway. So it's just about getting the message out and making sure people are understanding how they can, exactly like what Mark said, how they can join in the most efficient way. I mean, obviously, the key thing with what we see with user group attendance is that most people use the tools that we want anyway. So we're all using Microsoft Teams. Most people use it in their day-to-day basis, so they know they click on the link and they join Microsoft Teams. So it's not a massive onboarding issue for us in that respect. So logistically we are good. It's just again just getting people just to sit down and concentrate on what's going on and try and take part, which as Mark's already said is the hard part when you're doing something virtually rather than face to face.
Have you had any feedback from attendees on how they respond to videos or quality? Have you had any feedback on how they've received it?
I think it's all the feedback that we've had so far. I mean, I've hosted one so far. My next one is the Power Apps and Power Automate user group on the 12th of May, which is where I'm physically hosting them, again, using Microsoft Teams. So I'm using cloud technology, all within the confines of the UK, so it's not a massive issue for us. Generally, the other user groups that I've been involved with that have used Teams, most have been fine. You have the occasional one who maybe is in the middle of the country somewhere that doesn't necessarily have the best connection, that might have struggled, particularly if a lot of people have got videos on. Because everyone likes to still have their face there, because it's the whole social aspect. Is if I've got my video on, then it's almost we're trying to have that face-to-face piece. Obviously, that tends to eat bandwidth and so on. So people on the lesser connections tend to start struggling in that respect. But for the most part, it's all been good.
Good. Addis, have you done any virtual? I know you've had a couple. You're kind of looking at the smaller virtual event, aren't you, to tie people over? So how's that going?
So as Mark already mentioned, we are basically to bridge over the time until October. We decided then somehow to keep something on the original dates, which was beginning of June. We are trying to spin up one time, hopefully only one time, because hopefully we'll never have to do that again. Virtual event based on Microsoft Teams. We are working closely with the Teams PG on that one. And big thanks if she's watching this to Lori Potmeyer. She's just great. She's helping us on all levels, from setting up tenant and everything and the stuff. And basically we do not want to go in size. We are not making marathon 24, 36 hours. We are going to have probably between 30 and 40 sessions. Handpicked, curated. We are happy to that we can basically announce people like Jeff Keeper, Dan Holm, Donna Sarkar, Vesa Juvonen being some of the speakers, plus a lot of well-known MVP names there in this week. So we are filling up our speakers list all the time. What is important for us, that is mainly, for the biggest part, is an online event for our current attendees, which we had for the on-prem event. So we are basically marketing it mainly for them. Okay, yes, we moved this for October, but we would love if you guys would join us in June as well, because there will be things going on there. Sure, the other people can apply too. We are not preventing anybody. It's a free event. We are not preventing anybody from registering who is not to the main event. But basically, it's the difference is we are not going to go to the broad audience. At the moment, we have like something over 1,000, 1,500 attendees, and maybe a few hundred more will come. But those are definitely not the numbers that Mark will be getting with the Global Con or whatever. However, we really want to have like a set of curated, handpicked sessions from our basically from the speakers who, for one or another reason, could not make it to the physical event. So we wanted to have a bit of change there. So we are happy to have AC finally at our conference, at least even if it's a virtual, because for some reasons AC never managed to get to Europe when the Collab Summit really happens. But that might be a difference to the other two events that Mark has mentioned. We are not really trying to get gazillions of the attendees there. We just want to basically to do an event to existing attendees of the Collab Summit. Preparations are going pretty well. So we are, our signature is always trying to be a bit of funny and to put a bit of humor. We are a community event after all and everything. So you will see us putting funny videos about our speakers in the next days, kind of making a small jokes about those speakers with each of those videos, but harmless jokes. Obviously there's no harm meant in any way. So just try to relax a bit everybody, the attendees, audience, speakers, in these funny and crazy times.
That's a really interesting point, actually, and I know I've done both. I've done online sessions, I've pre-filmed them, and I've done lots and lots of in-person ones. And I find videos so much harder to put together as a speaker. You feel like everything needs to be absolutely perfect. If I fluff my intro, I've got to go back and re-record it. Got to go back, re-record it. Go back, re-record it over and over and over and over. And I find it so hard, and everything has to be so clinically produced. And I think you can lose a certain amount of character when you do that. And a lot of videos can be delivered very, very monotonous and very kind of in that way. Whereas in a room, I'll be walking around and picking on people and having a bit of fun and making some jokes. And when you're doing a video, I think for me personally, I find it harder as a speaker to be able to actually convey that fun over. So I like that idea. And I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
I can only fully agree. When you're doing a live session for the people in the room, for the audience, and your laptop starts behaving crazy. Everybody of them from your audience knows that it can happen. Show me one who did this. So you can just take your laptop and smash it and say, bloody laptop. You can't do that in an online session.
No.
Basically, you stop and start recording again.
Yeah.
We've kind of stopped because obviously we've been doing it for 6 years now. We've done quite a few. And I think I've spoke to you a few times about it, Mark. We've kind of stopped doing live now, apart from talking heads like this, because a lot of the sessions in our community are obviously very heavy demo based. And some of the speakers really enjoy actually doing some extra production quality on top of them. But the big problem we've had with live, and it's absolutely gutting to see when the speakers put so much effort in and they've turned up to do the session, and then all you're going to get, this is blurred. I can't hear this dude. And some people are actually quite rude in there, and you think, well, the speakers turned up, they're delivering this free of charge for you. And so we've kind of been put off a little bit with it. And I think that even on demand, and it was crazy, even last time, we had problems with Vimeo. So we host them in Vimeo, and we play them out as though they're live. So to be honest, we never make it a thing where we try and say it is live. But most people think it is live, because if you come into the session 40 seconds in, you're going to get 40 seconds into the session, and everybody thinks it. And Vimeo's been absolutely amazing for us, all conferences. But last time they've got some severe load issues, and Vimeo starts to go down on us, even though it's on demand. So we had to fail over to a YouTube backup, because we back up everything 3 times. And I couldn't believe it. So even though it wasn't live, it was on demand, pre-recorded, we still had issues with it. But I think that's kind of a lot of that's the times we're in, because all these services have been rammed up to the max, aren't they? Let's face it.
Yeah, I remember that happening, actually. Yeah, I think I was talking to you on Facebook Messenger, right? That was going on then. But it's a whole new set of issues, isn't it? And I guess it's a nice thing with cloud is the fact that for the likes of Matt, when you're not going at the same kind of scale, you've got something there you can just turn on. You don't need to worry about it. We can just turn on to online very easily. So that's got to be a big benefit. But then as you get a bit bigger, you are at the mercy of somebody else at that point,
Yeah, and it allows you to do, some of the speakers do, like Daryl went off on, I think he did a team session where he got a 360 camera and he was going around his office.
That was awesome.
He was taking an idea of, well, this is in person, this is how you do this in this, and then this is how you do it in Teams. And it was like, oh my God, that's really good. And you could never do that live, let's face it.
Yeah, that was an awesome session. Literally, here's the in-person way of doing something and having a conversation, and here's the Teams equivalent of that.
Brilliant.
That was a brilliant session, yeah.
So, yeah, it does have benefits going pre-record, actually. You can do things like that.
It's just introducing a little bit of that out-of-the-box thinking, isn't it, that you can't do if you, like you say, if you physically stood there. You can utilize technology or utilize even effects to help make your points that little bit more interesting to the people who are watching.
Yeah,
definitely. I want to talk a bit more about then the social side of it, networking side of it. I know we've already spoke about that in the past, and this is something I've spent years and years and years thinking about. And and always wondering about what people want from that, because obviously we're slightly different. We're speakers. We're used to kind of putting ourselves there. We're used to going in and doing that networking, and that's super important to us. I guess the question is that as important to the majority of the attendees as it is to us, or do we think it should be? And it is. So is it a big loss for a lot of people? Do people quite like hiding on a chat where they don't have to get involved and people aren't going to look at them and they can just lurk if they want to? So I'm just interested in what you guys think about how important that is to the majority of attendees, and if we've ever really thought about it compared to how we want it to be.
Well, I don't mind saying my two penneth. I've actually canvassed my kids who are now 17 and 15, and I actually said to them, would you, as you'll know, Hannah, from before, I said, would you ever see yourself going to a physical conference to learn something you want to learn about? And they're like, I'd like to go traveling to see the place, but no, it would fill me with dread going to the conference. I don't really want to do it. I don't like the idea of socializing, because I think with the new generation coming through, they've been brought up on the phone. They've been brought up with convenience, and everything's like one tap away, and it's like, oh, I'm getting in and out of that. And so I think that's brought with it anxieties as well. And there's quite a few people, I think, in that generation starting to suffer with social anxiety. So as the new generation comes up, we might have to do different things inside of the physical conferences to make them feel more at ease. I think there's still a big call in our age group to go to them because we're obviously used to all that kind of thing. But yeah.
That's interesting.
There's a ghost at the door.
I'm surprised my 4-year-old hasn't smashed in the back of the door yet. Addis, what do you think about that then from the larger?
I had this morning call with my partners, business-wise, they asked after we finished this business project, they were like, so we can't wait to come back to Wiesbaden for the Collab Summit, to meet people, to actually have a beer, have a glass of wine, and to talk. Because I think for people, we hear what Mark is saying, and he's not wrong in what Mark says. It's definitely not wrong. But maybe I'm too much in our age group. My kids are way too small to be thinking about going to conferences, definitely younger than Mark's. But our age group, our people, they want to get out from their offices, from their daily minds, to learn something, to talk to like-minded people. Because I sometimes can feel, because yes, we are trying to put the best program in the world and everything, but they enjoy more in talking to the peers. So Matt, how did you solve that? Or Mark, how did you solve that? Or did you face this problem? Because it's sometimes easier to talk to the peers than to the speakers. So one of the things, don't tell to anybody else except to the whole world, obviously. But one thing we will probably going to get rid of the speaker room, because we realize speaker room is one of the biggest evils you can actually have on a physical event. So it might happen that we just get rid of the speaker room.
I like that idea. There are a lot of I'm one of those speakers that spends very little time in the speaker room. Obviously, work dictates sometimes, but I like getting out and walking around and talking to people. I like being approachable, and you do find a lot of speakers just camp out in the speaker room the whole time. It's great. The speakers are all really good friends. It's a very, very close community for those people who don't know it, and it's nice for them to spend those couple of opportunities a year. But sometimes I do feel that a lot of speakers can just camp out in that room and hide away from everyone else, and I think there's an obligation to actually mix in the room, yes, walk around the exhibition, and just be accessible and have those conversations.
So we have ideas like having speaker booths and everything, but basically will be the most probably getting rid of the speaker room for the very reasons. So for the people, it is important. The social contact is important. So how social contact is going to develop in the future, in the light of what Mark just said, I don't know. If I would know that, I would probably be a millionaire, but I don't. But I might see this type of behavior happening, what Mark just said. Then you have another question. For example, our conference lives from sponsors, and just to put straight the table, because we are not living of attendees, because not with those prices. How do you make it interesting enough for the sponsors? And sponsors want to be there because they want to show what they did, their products or their services to the people there. So that there will also be this issue: how do you accommodate sponsors of the virtual events? How do you do that? We basically gave up on that for our virtual conference. We just left the sponsors. If you want to have a sponsor session, we have room for 4. First comes, first serves. That was done, but we basically did not push too much on the virtual for the sponsors because it's a terra nova for us. We don't know really how to do that. I think we are good dealing with sponsors on the physical event, on the in-person event. We are now thinking about some concepts to, because this, one step back, because this event, virtual event we are doing in June is mainly for the attendees, to help the attendees. Okay, here are some sessions. We might be doing something very special for the sponsors in the late summer, just to have something. We are still thinking about how to reward our sponsor for being really faithful friends to us all the time. So that's, I don't know. I would really like to hear from Mark. How do you accommodate sponsors in your event? Because it is difficult in virtual.
So interesting. Yeah. We actually had this conversation. Was it about a week or 2 ago? We were talking about sponsors and online, weren't we, a little bit? So.
Yeah, we don't. Although say that, we have just started a trade, but the reason we don't, but we used to. So when we run, to step back 6 years, when you run online events, you were able to get quite a lot of organic traffic, but that's still what didn't cover your costs, because you still got hosting costs. You still need to run some ads no matter what. Mm-hmm. You still have a cost to cover. No matter what you do, you're going to have a cost. Otherwise, you're going to have an event with nobody coming at it. And so what we used to do is create a sponsors package. We did virtual sponsors rooms. And what we did is we were able to give the lead data back to the sponsors. But obviously then GDPR came along, and I've since checked all this again. GDPR comes along, unless you get opt-in to every single sponsor, either at the time when you open it, plus at the end, you cannot do anything with that data. You can't send that data out to that sponsor. They can't get the data. And more often than not, certainly for the smaller companies like we were, when we sponsor something, you kind of want leads. You want hard leads that you can go back to because you've owned the lead. And that's the big problem. You've taken away, because you can't give them the lead, you've taken away tons of value. And so up until this point, and all last year, we stopped doing it and we changed our model entirely. And I scratched my head thinking, well, how can we pay thousands of pounds on Facebook ads and production costs and cover our costs and still keep it free? And so that's where we introduced the All Access Pass. And it's a bit of a beast to create, but it gives you the sessions on demand. And as you all know, we create ebooks from it. Mm-hmm. And we add a load of other goodies in. And if enough people buy the All Access Pass, we cover our costs. And so far, apart from one, we've done it. But we are on this one actually starting to offer. We've been very, very transparent, very open, saying, look, this is not as good a deal as it used to be, because we cannot give you the leads, but we will give you some brand awareness. So we can play an advert before your session. We will put your sponsored logo on, and we'll probably give you a mention in a wrap-up email at the end, but that's kind of it. But we don't charge them any money, and we're just doing a simple trade for that. So if they want to trade and tell people about the event, brilliant, you can have a logo on an advert. And so that's how we're planning it. And we are thinking about it in the future, but until you get something where you can almost give the leads back or give them a great top of funnel experience, so you drive people into their funnels, I think it's like quite low value for sponsors nowadays.
I think you need to educate. I mean, again, I can talk on this, being a sponsor of events as well. Obviously, we sponsor Collab Summits as well, and done some SharePoint Saturdays, and I'm talking to Mark about sponsorship on his events because we're very close on those. And it is difficult, and I think the sponsors need to be educated. You're absolutely right. When we come to an event like Collab Summit, we need to talk to people and find those leads. Just having a list of 2,000 names isn't really that much value to us, because we end up just being a spammer and then people don't like us, and there's not a lot you can do around that. So it really is just getting those 4 or 5 maybe really good conversations that just make it worth it. But so I think it is about changing the expectation of the actual sponsor, and I would be okay with that and saying, okay, we can just play a short video in between, but I'm going to accept that that's going to be more like a Google ad, where I'm just going to blank it out there and then just see who's going to proactively come in. So ultimately, that does mean I am going to spend less money on that sponsorship package than I would do for an in-person one, because I don't have the commitment of being in there and access to people, to get people and to take those conversations. So, but then you have to kind of play a bit more economies of scale. But then where do you draw the balance on too many adverts, or how do you drive people into a sponsor room? Because who's going to choose to go to a sponsor room? Probably no one, unless you make a little competition or a little raffle or something like that. I mean, I think that challenge is something that exists in the in-person events anyway. How do you make sure that the attendees are coming to the people's booths? Seb Matthews in SharePoint Saturday London had a really good one. I think it was the London one, where he had the raffle. Get a stamp on every sponsor, and then you're in the prize draw at the end. That worked brilliantly. Okay, you get a lot of people who are not interested, but it's very easy to quickly just stamp and let people go on and pick out those. So,
yeah, but that only works until escape. We are doing the stamp cards until the last year. And when we were still a bit smaller event, a few hundred people, it was, as you said, it was the best thing after sliced bread. But you know what the sponsors told us? All of the sponsors told us the last year. Please stop doing that.
Too many people.
Yeah, no. Too many people just walking around and getting stamps.
Yeah.
So they don't have time to actually have meaningful conversations because somebody is always on the booth just doing this bloody stamping.
So SharePoint Saturday, fewer people gives you more time per person, but as you get above a certain size, So we have 10 sponsors coming to us and telling us, stop doing this. and we listen to them. We will stop doing this stamp cards, because obviously if you have just 2,000 people circling around getting stamps, it doesn't really make sense. You don't have time to actually engage into a meaningful conversation. Yeah. Interesting. So how do we, so the question is, how do we solve it? So I guess put it out to people there. So people who are sponsoring events as well, what would you want from it? People who are attending events, how would you access sponsors? I'd be interested if we can get feedback out there from people who talk to us. These are the people who organise the events. This is an opportunity to say how you do it. And I think people do realise that the sponsors make the event happen. I know when I first started events years ago, I used to try and avoid them like the plague, because they're always going to email you afterwards. But people do realise that pays for the free event. If you're not paying anything, then you are the product at the end of the day. Yeah. I think people accept that. So
we will be doing. We still did not have a final concept. We have a direction, ideas. We will be doing. We will be paying way more attention to gamification in the next event. So we will be trying to channelize those people to those sponsors who they are really interested in, without into their products, without really pushing them to visit all 75 sponsors, because it does not make sense. Because nobody's interested in 75 products. I mean, that will just not. But somebody who wants to have intranet or a social modern workplace, then I want to send him to Mark Stokes, because it's something that Mark can offer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, Matt, how does this relate to you then? Because obviously, you have costs doing user groups, and it's easy to kind of say, it's user groups and that, but actually on a personal level, someone who's organised user groups very regularly, the cost does add up. When it's somebody on their own without sponsors or anything like that doing it, that can be a big burden. So from a user group perspective, even though it's smaller, and a personal commitment to keep doing it, the pressure to do it, how do you find that scenario?
So generally in a user group scenario, we're quite lucky, because it's usually hosted at somebody's office who's involved with the setup of the actual event. So the Office 365 and SharePoint user group that we hold in Birmingham is kind of hosted by Rico. They do that free of charge for us, because I used to work for them, and we also still have a number of people who are involved from that company who help us to put it on there. So whilst it's not direct sponsorship in terms of we're going to pay you money to advertise ourselves, it's indirect in the fact that we're going into the office, we've got all the branding and so on, so that they're still getting a little bit of awareness out there. And I suppose it's exactly the same with the Black Country Power Apps and Power Automate user group, because even though that's not hosted in an actual office, I always use this as one of my selling points. I host this in a brewery. It's so
good choice.
Yeah, we have.
I want to come.
So for you conference owners, breweries always go down well. But basically, sponsorship is always very much on a very light touch on a user group level. You might get a mention or a logo just displayed on the advertising, but that's it. And that's always been the agreement that we've had with the user groups. It's always been very, very community driven, and anything else beyond that is just really indirect. So again, it's not a massive impact on what we've been doing. It's more so just those companies that have supported us that are no longer having the visibility of being seen to support the community. That's the big thing that's now missing for them.
Mm. So I think I didn't really see what time we started. I think we are kind of running through on the time a little bit. So I've got a couple of things that I want to just talk about at the end, just the last couple of points. How do we think Microsoft will cope with some of their mega conferences? When we talk about Build and Ignite, what do we think is going to happen there?
The one thing I had this conversation recently with the people, Microsoft even postponed all the events until 2021. It started with Ignite. They first canceled Ignite being in person, if you remember. The reason why they canceled Ignite is very simple. They were not selling any tickets because who is going to buy anything now? I can tell you, we are not selling anything now. I mean, we are in the lucky position to say, hey, we have a sold-out conference. We could sell another 100 or 200 tickets, but we are not selling anything now because nobody's buying anything now. And events who are now in autumn in-person events are going to have a huge issue with selling anything. Because by the time when the people start buying those tickets again, we'll probably be facing economical crisis, financial crisis. The most probably, at least if I'm to believe all the financial experts and the economists out there. Plus, the time is really short. I mean, probably it's going to be September where people will start feeling calmly to start buying tickets, and those events are already in October or end of September, as Ignite was basically. So there was basically It was difficult for them, but then again, Microsoft has this luxury and this financial means just to say, hey, so what? We are just doing it. Virtually, and if we have to pay some penalties to the venue and to the hotels, well, we are going to pay those penalties.
Do you think they can stage an event that big virtually? I mean, again, the technology involved in that. I mean, no one's really done those events that big on that kind of scale. So that's got to be a monumental task.
Matt, have you been following, or how much have you been following the MVP Virtual Summit?
So I followed most of it, and that worked to an extent. Basically, they were having multiple showings of the sessions to cater for all the different time zones. But obviously, that's a much smaller audience than what they're going to have for the likes of it.
And it's a focused audience. I mean, you know who your MVPs are. So basically, it's something that's relatively easy to control. How is that going to work for 10,000 people or 20,000 people?
Yeah, it's going to be. Do you know if they're going to charge for it? For the virtual?
Nobody knows that. It's a great question. Nobody knows that.
Because that'll be really interesting. Because I would like just to even charge just a small amount just to see what it would do to actually whether people would come. But I've got a funny feeling, even if you charge like $5, 90% of people won't come. And I think if Microsoft do that, because YouTube's only one click away, I think if they charge for Ignite, then that's going to be. I don't think you'll get 10,000 there. I might be wrong. You could do.
But I think it's nice. They've set a bit of a precedent over the last couple of years, haven't they, where they've made a number of their streams available for free for those people that can't travel anyway.
Yeah.
Most videos have gone on to Channel 9 anyway, very, very shortly after, and I know I only had my first Ignite before, and that's how I used to follow it.
But then again, that's very much connected to the question, what's the value of the in-person event? Yeah. If you tell me that nobody's going to pay $5 for an online conference with the very same content, but would pay $2,000 to get plus plane tickets if you are in Europe, plus hotel, ridiculously high hotel prices where they are holding it, then this is your value of the in-person event.
Yeah. Outside of the US, I've never ever, until a couple of years ago, I actually got some business funding to help me go to part pay and pay half the amount. And before then, I would never ever have been able to justify the sheer cost of attending Ignite, even with the people I know, the networking I would get. Now, having actually been there once, that value was there. It really was. I mean, being in the room, access to, from our position, access to the product groups and the Microsoft guys walking around, there is so much value. It is worth every penny. Would I still pay £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 for it? Not out of my own pocket. My company might, or someone else might, but yeah.
But then again, it's your company. We are all four in the same boat there. Yeah. Then again, it's your company.
Yeah, exactly.
It still hurts.
Yeah, I've never justified it until that one time because we got part funding, and but yeah, it's interesting. So I think they've got a monumental task. I'd be very interested to see how it comes about. I guess that kind of leads me on to maybe my final question. Just looking at the time that we're on, is what do we think is going to be the future for our communities after this? Is this going to have a lasting effect? Do we think we'll slip back to having our normal in-person conferences and our normal virtual conferences to different audiences, or do we think this will have a different and an impact on how our communities are expecting to interact with us?
I think it possibly will have a longer lasting effect, because one of the main reasons we don't know when this COVID drama is going to end, and until we get a vaccine, it's not going to end anytime soon. And so there's always going to be that hesitation. Shall I go to a physical event? Shall I book it? I'm booked on one next year. It's a marketing conference, and I know I've got to cancel it. It's in January, because I won't even be able to get to the States. And so because of that, online events they'll have to up their game, and we're thinking about ways to up our game as well. They have to up the game to make them more interactive, to make and do things like VR. So like we've discussed, do things like that and try to make them a little bit more like in-person events. And they're never going to get there, but even breakout rooms. But I think it will change. But people will also, as soon as that lockdown's released, will be like, right, get me an event. I'm going, I'm out of here. So there will be a bit of a spring back. But yeah.
So Matt, what about the user groups? Because I know I was involved in setting rules years ago, or enforcing the rules for the user groups across the UK from the SharePoint user groups, at least anyway, the ones I controlled, is I banned people from streaming the user group events from our user groups, and I banned having virtual. I occasionally allowed virtual speakers, but the big thing for us was to force people to be a bum in a seat to do that networking. So if a speaker has travelled from London to Manchester, that there's more than 3 people there. Because as soon as you make a session virtual, there's no reason for people to come along. And if a speaker has made the trip, I wanted to make sure he had she had an audience. But how do you think this changes that for user groups?
Yeah, I mean, some of the feedback that I've already had is almost an expectation that there will also be a streaming capability on some of these user groups afterwards. Obviously, that comes with its own challenges, that we need some decent equipment in order to have the live speaker there, but also then being able to film them and have good audio. So I think there might be a bit of an unrealistic expectation for small user groups to be able to do that. But nevertheless, it's something that's being asked for. But I think it keeps coming back to those things that we've mentioned all the way through, is why do we actually go to these events? Yes, we go to hear some of these, some of the actual presentations, but for the most part, it's so that we can actually have some face-to-face and actual interpersonal contact. That's the whole, just going off on a slight anecdote, I went to Ignite, the tour down in London at the start of this year. If I managed to make 3 sessions throughout the entire 2 days, that was about it. And one of those I was actually involved in. And that's because what I got out of that most of all was just being able to go around and speak to people. And just, like Addy's mentioned, just sharing those stories, being able to speak to your peers. And I think that's still the key driver that's going to bring people back to the user groups after this is all done.
Addis, do you think have a long-term impact on your communities? Too early to say.
If I would know that, I would be a millionaire again. I have no idea. So we started last year with promoting more and more digital content of our conference. So we made, for example, the app the main experience, and we started independently from the COVID stuff. We started with the magazine, which is now online, with the Collab magazine and everything. With the gamification, which we started before, but working on now, we are definitely going to that. I think what will happen is what Mark Jones just said, that the online virtual events will try to give some in-person experience to those virtual rooms, chat rooms, however we call them, and that the in-person event will probably introduce some digital content which accompanies the events. They will never meet in the middle. I don't see that happening, but I think that on the both sides we will see kind of overtaking bits of another side to a degree. So never fully to the degree they would actually meet in the middle, but basically, we will be introducing some digital content. Mark will be introducing chat rooms, talk rooms, or however we want to call them, to emulate it in-person experience. And that's basically what I think is going to happen.
I think so. I think my view is largely they would stay fairly separate, and I think people still leverage both of them. I think people tend to pick one or two big in-person conferences in a year and then take the rest of the community stuff virtually. So I think there's still, I think where it may meet in the middle, and actually interesting that it's not even come to me, it's come up in every single conversation we've had so far, is the conversation around virtual reality. I know me and Mark are quite keen on it. We've spoken about this in the past. I don't know if you guys have ever explored it or not, but I know there's a big group of our community, our leaders community, who is talking about.
For SP24, like a whole complete virtual space or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So something like Alt Space VR, you can have everyone in a room, hundreds of people, virtual presenter talking out, and you do get more of that in-person feel. You get more of the immersion there, and we've done this before through Mark's out of the virtual chat room. The people who are in there, you do feel that. The big thing that Mark mentioned before is getting distracted. For me, I can't watch many virtual events for a long period of time. I have to pick and choose my sessions because it's too easy to get distracted. I can't have it on in the background. I've got to focus on it, otherwise I don't follow it. The nice thing with the virtual reality environment is I am in that room. I'm conscious and worried about who's around me, whether my family think I'm being stupid sitting with this ridiculous headset on or not. So you have that kind of anxiety, people around you, until it becomes more accessible. But once you're in that scenario, you do feel the immersion. You are more inclined to stay in that and not get distracted. So I think there is a big element. I don't know if we've got time to go into it now, but I think virtual reality is that place where it fits in the middle. I think there's a long way to go. I think we're 5, maybe 10 years off that being a normal still. The Oculus Quest has definitely made it more accessible. I've seen tons of people going out buying Oculus Go's because we're talking about it. They're like, okay, well, I'll give it a go, and they're loving it. So I think this may spur more people into trying it. Whether we hit that critical mass before this is over, I don't know. I don't think so. But I think we will see that come in a lot more. And we've proved we can deliver sessions from virtual reality. We've proved we can deliver sessions in virtual reality and do chat rooms. It's just having enough people willing to give it a go. But I think that's where it meets in the middle long term.
Yeah. It's just to recap on that one, it's the closest experience I've ever had to actually being with a real human being. And it's especially the Oculus Room stuff where it's actually really, really completely realistic and very cool as well, with these beautiful backdrops. But you do all the same kind of mannerisms come into VR as well. So you don't like to talk over people, and you make sure you're looking at them even though they can't really see you. But somebody's speaking, you turn around and you're looking at them like that. Yeah. And so it does bring some of the human aspects into an online event effectively.
And the test I always have is when people come in for the first time, I get my virtual selfie stick, I turn around and take a photo of us, and then I ask them afterwards, did you smile in real life? And they always say yes, because they're that immersed in it. They think, oh, taking a photo, and it does work.
Yeah. And as it progresses, a lot actually gets taken into VR, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's where I want to see things go in the future, and I know a few of us are going to try and do some virtual events going forward. So
here's our record again.
An echo.
Yeah, there is a bit of an echo there.
There you go. Oh.
Maybe.
There you go. Here's one drawbacks of virtual events, so don't get this. Anyway, but I think we're at time there anyway. So I think what we'll do, we'll actually close that down. I think that was really interesting, fascinating, some really good points there, and I'm interested to hear what everyone at home thinks about that. So please do send us messages. Please do support these guys as well in their communities. Everyone's trying really, really hard at the moment to continue delivering content. And I think I'm actually seeing people asking for content more. I think maybe because people can't get to an event, people are wanting to do more, and I've seen that across a number of different factors. So I just want to thank you guys very, very much. That was really useful. So thank you very much. If you have any parting thoughts, please feel free. If not, then we can let people back on with the day.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye, people.
Yes.
Thanks for joining the Isolation Conversation. Visit our website www.thisisattollo.com for latest information, or hit the subscribe button and the like button to make sure you never miss an episode. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in this episode, we'd really appreciate you leaving a comment below or sharing a link to the show with your friends and colleagues, and that would really help us out. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode, and until then, it's a huge thanks from me for watching.